Hi. You know what? I'm going to do something really quick here too. But oh, oh my gosh. Gotta ignore that. I should have had this set to go.
Are we live on the air while you're
We
doing
are
that? We
live.
are.
Go
Hi,
ahead.
friends. Hope you're
I just
having a good
realized I
day.
didn't have
She's.
everything ready, and I should have.
We were chatting.
We
That's our
were chatting,
problem.
but that's okay. We get
And we
things
had
going a
to
little bit.
limit our conversation so that our conversation right now is fresh, right?
Right,
We
right.
couldn't talk about all the things that we wanted to because I wanted it to be fresh.
Yes, so we're just trying to kind of get ready here. But so today's episode is a little bit different in that we don't have like a real topic. We just kind of wanted to update people on some things that Gwen and I are working on. And uh, anyway, go
Yeah.
ahead, Gwen.
So we've had the opportunity to present to a group. It was a wide variety of healthcare workers between nurses, hospice, some medical students, some physicians.
Yeah.
And we think that we make a really great team. I think we do. Just the balance that we have between, Marcy, your professional experience, but now your personal experience and how you can present that in a way to your colleagues in a way that I couldn't. And it just was really heartfelt and very moving, and just the direction that you gave them.
Yeah.
And then you had an hour, I had an hour, and we did some Q&A. And in my hour, we just talked about, I feel, on behalf of most bereaved people, that my job is to educate how hard the work of grief really is. And we talked about that. And then we looked at maybe giving them some tips and strategies on what they could do. And then the sponsor, one of the main sponsors of the event that we did, was Heritage Funeral Home. Heritage Life Story Funeral Home in Grand Rapids, and they wanted some self-care for physicians and healthcare workers just coming off the 2 years that we had. So we did talk about self-care.
Yeah. And overall, it is something that's become kind of near and dear to my heart a little bit. I really think back. I'm going to share one of the stories that I did share. And I think I've shared it here on the podcast before, but I'm not really quite sure. And this is going way back to when I was in college and my mother was dying of cancer. And we knew that she was dying and that she'd had cancer for 2.5 years and had not been doing well. And I came home for Christmas break in my junior year, and she was quite sick. And I remember I took her to the hospital that day because she was going in for some chemotherapy, and her blood pressure was crazy low, like really, really low. And they said, we're going to have to put you in the hospital. And she went into the hospital, and we fully expected her to be able to be out by Christmas. They would give her some meds to help kind of strengthen her heart a little bit. I remember the cardiology team came in and said, she really would be the perfect candidate for a heart transplant, but she's got metastatic cancer, so obviously she can't get a heart transplant. And anyway, so we're at the hospital, and my parents were also in the midst of moving. So they were going to be moving to a condo because my mom couldn't really handle the stairs anymore. My brother was graduating from high school. They were just going to downsize a little bit. So they went from our big house to a condo. And Dad thought, well, when she comes home from the hospital, let's not put her back in the house where she's going to have to do the stairs. We're going to go straight to the condo. So he and my brother were moving, and they were doing all of this stuff. And I'm there by myself with my mom in the hospital. And this is just maybe 2 days before Christmas, maybe even Christmas Eve, actually. And one of the nurses came in the room and said, can I talk to you for a minute? And pulled me out of the room. And I got out of the room, and there were a few nurses gathered in the hallway. And they said to me, we don't think you should be alone because your mom could die at any minute. And I did not know what to think. I was
Mhm.
was completely and totally in shock because
Mhm.
I did not know. And what's really crazy is I was in shock because I didn't know she was dying, and the nurses were in shock because I didn't know she
She
was
was dying.
dying
Right. They didn't know that you didn't know.
because they thought we
Mhm.
knew.
Right.
And they thought, wow, that was a stupid choice for her husband and son to just leave and leave
Right.
only one with her and whatever. But we really did not know. We
Mm.
had no idea. And I was in the midst of doing, starting that application process for medical school and thinking about going to medical school and all of this stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, I will never do this, right? I
Mhm.
will never screw up like that. Because what ended up happening was I had to go now back in the room. The nurses like awkwardly left me. I tried to kind of get myself back together a little bit.
Mhm.
I walked back in the room to see my mom, and she could tell I was really upset.
Yes.
And she looked at me and she said, I'm dying, aren't I?
Mm.
And I had to say yes.
Mhm.
And then I remember she opened up her arm. I
Mm.
went up beside her bed. I knelt at her bed and she started rubbing my head just like she did when I was a little girl to comfort me
Yeah.
because she was dying and we just found this out. And I thought, I will never do this. I will never screw up that bad.
Mhm.
Those doctors and nurses did a horrible job. Certainly, they learned in their training
Mhm.
how to do that better. I mean, a 21-year-old college student should not have to be the one to tell her mom she's dying.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So then I go through all of my training, all of medical school, all of everything, and I realize
No.
they didn't.
No.
Nobody
And
taught them. It's not they didn't forget.
and
Nobody taught them.
right. And it's not something like there's a big checklist that says someone's got to tell this person they're dying and you roll the dice at the nurse's desk and decide who's going to tell. It's like it's this hidden
Yeah, and the
thing.
nurses think that the doctors did it, and I
Right.
think honestly, in hindsight, I really think that the doctors thought they told us when they
Mhm.
said she would be a perfect candidate for a heart transplant, but she can't have it
Right.
because she has metastatic cancer. So they thought
Right.
that they told us,
Right.
but they didn't tell us. I mean, that's wasn't telling us
Ugh.
anything. It's just what they assumed, I think.
Right. And I think that happens a lot. And they think that we can read their minds and in those hidden again messages that we get somewhere get the truth out of that. And many families don't. And in working with bereaved people, how many times people said no one told us.
Yeah, no one told us.
Yeah. And it's so frustrating.
And I think they do. I mean,
Mhm.
because
Right.
now I've been on the other side a lot of years, right?
Right.
I graduated from medical school in 2000. So I've been
Mhm.
doing this 22 years. And, it's so funny because you think I would have realized it earlier on, like, because I made that vow. I'm not, this is
Mhm.
not going to happen to me. But then it slowly happened to me.
Right.
And you just get indoctrinated into what you're taught and you do what you're taught
Mhm.
and you realize that you're still just as awkward and I'm still that 21-year-old college kid who doesn't know any better because no one taught her any better
Right.
how to break news to families, how to talk to people when they're dying, how to talk to people after their child's died,
Right.
or I mean, in my case, child, because I'm a pediatrician,
Right.
but in anybody's
Right.
case, it's other things. And so it just started to kind of hit me more and more after Andy died,
Mhm.
how lacking it is because I've talked to so many families now.
Yeah, you've heard it.
I've
Just like
heard
I
it.
hear it
I've
over
heard it
and over and
and
over.
over and over that they don't know what the heck they're doing and no one told me
Yeah.
and because they don't know
And
what
I
they're
think
doing.
there's this myth because there's a myth in grief that if you don't talk about your feelings or face them, they'll get better, right?
Yeah.
And that's a myth. But I do
Time
think
heals
there's
all wounds.
there's this myth that we can go on the fringe of it and people could get the gist of what's going on here without having to be direct and say, I have something to tell you. And the other part is that some doctors actually are very direct, but they're so direct and curt that I've heard, they told the person while they were on a gurney in the hallway coming, from surgery into the recovery room and no family was there. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, the message was direct, but the delivery was awful. So we got to have a balance.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm curious, as part of your story, forgive me for not remembering, how soon after that did your mom die?
Well, so I'm telling you, I'm not remembering if that conversation was on the 23rd or the 24th, but what ended up happening is on the 25th, on Christmas Day, she went into hospice, into a hospice unit, and then she died on the 28th.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was, I mean, it wasn't really like the nurses thought it could be any moment. It really wasn't. It was more like 4 days later, but still, it was not what we expected.
Right.
I mean, not even close to what we expected.
This book is out of print, so I won't even mention it, but basically, well, the title of it was, if you want to know if you're dying, ask the cleaning lady. And the gist was, in a hospital setting, everyone will dance around it, but the cleaning person will come in and say, so you're dying, huh?
Yeah.
And have those conversations with the patient that nobody else will have.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
Well, but anyway, it got got me really thinking about talking better to teach maybe physicians and nurses and just hospital staff in general what to do instead, and how to maybe feel a little more comfortable in that space, because it isn't comfortable for anyone, but it is part of your job. I mean, it is part of the job. It's not a part that anybody likes, but it is part of the job.
And I think one of the things that I feel like we really accomplished well was letting them know some of the normal reactions of grief, so that when someone's in their office or they're seeing a patient after who's in the depths of their pain, what's normal, rather than being alerted, just like the rest of the world, that thinks, oh no, this person needs some kind of treatment in order to get better. And just educating them on what's normal was huge.
And I think that is important, because I think even to myself, I went to the doctor within probably a month or two of Andy dying. And I don't think I had like a specific reason that I had to go, except that everyone said to me, you should go see your doctor.
Right. Yeah, you
need to go see the doctor, because you're like, I'm a mess, right? I'm not doing
Everyone's
well.
worried about you.
Everyone's worried about me. And like, what do we do? Send her to the doctor.
Right.
And maybe she'll just give her a prescription and it'll all be better.
I do think that's people's way of feeling comfort, like the doctor's going to know what to do.
I
right?
know.
Yeah.
And you know what? The doctor doesn't have any clue what to do, unfortunately. I wish they did.
Now, we're saying this, and if people are watching now or later, I'd kind of like to know some of we don't want to hear just the bad, right? There are bad, and
there are beautiful stories too.
Right. Yeah. The good ones of who's gotten it right and how they handled that would be nice to know, because there are some very compassionate.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not saying that those who don't do it well aren't compassionate.
No.
I go back to what you're saying. They were not taught. It's a hidden in the curriculum for them just to pick up a little bit here and there. It's not direct. There's not clear instruction of what's helpful and what's not.
Well, and we finished our talks, our discussion, and the man that we had doing the video recording, it's interesting because he said to me afterwards, he said a member of his family, I think it was his dad or somebody, had died, and they were wanting to like have a conversation with the doctor about what was happening and feelings and things like that. And the doctor actually said to them, I'm sorry, I just can't go there. If I would go there with every patient, I wouldn't be able to do it or something. Right. It was like very curt, very like, and I just totally cut him off. But he felt justified because he's like, if I can't get emotional, and that is what's kind of taught. Don't get emotional. Don't get too emotionally involved.
Right. And you did a great job bringing that human nature, the humanity back to it.
And I think that's where you came in too, was like, but how do you take care of yourself?
Right.
When you show your humanity like that, because it is important to show your humanity, but not to the point where now you are really, struggling yourself.
That's a great comment.
Yeah. So someone just wrote in a comment, I struggle with the doctors wanting to medicate people that are grieving. It isn't always the answer. depression without loss is different than grief after loss.
Absolutely.
That is 100% true.
And that's what we talked about.
We did talk
knowing
about
the
that.
difference, and that the depression that comes with grief is there, but it's different. Like, the viewer mentioned, and it's not necessarily something that has to be treated, because when we treat people or look for a cure, we want to eradicate and get rid of, and we cannot get rid of this, right? So we
No.
need care instead of a cure, and that's different.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I like that. How you put that.
Yeah. I
Care
said that
instead
on
of
that
cure.
Saturday, but
Well, I'm sorry if I
that's
forgot.
Okay. We were both a little we weren't stressed. It was just a lot.
No, it was a lot. I mean, we spoken
I have to go back to something you said about the videographer. Interestingly enough, his second camera person came up to me and said that usually when they are the second camera person, they bring a book or they're just kind of bored, and really thought this would be something that would bore them. And they were so engaged in what was happening in those conversations. So that it's the stuff that we taught is not just for physicians. It's something you can take in all of your life and learn about how to handle people.
Yeah. Well, and goes back to the thing that we're not curing anything. And there is nothing to be cured here. It's just, you just have to work through it and carry through it.
Yep. Definitely.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of what we're working on. I've got some upcoming episodes that will talk about this a little bit too, about some other couples that are working on helping the medical community as well. And I'm hoping that we can partner with them a little bit. So you guys can certainly listen to upcoming episodes and I think hear a little more about that. And if you have ideas or people that you think we could talk to that could really help with this, we would be happy to, because really, I do feel like as much as I feel very called to care for grieving people, I feel really kind of equally called to care for people who are caring for grieving people, because that is what happens.
Well,
the medical
it's where you
community
live.
is supposed to care for people, and they don't know how to care for grieving people.
Right. The best part about today's world is if you live in Idaho or somewhere other parts of the world, we can still do this virtually, because we've been invited to do a virtual conference. And so if there's a group that you have or belong to or need some education pieces, we've been asked to do a couple of cancer centers to their staff. And so it's not that we have to travel. Yep.
It's and not. Then we're doing a suicide summit. We both did that.
And that was all virtual.
And that's going to all be virtual. I mean, we've already recorded it, but it's not been out yet.
I'm imagining people thinking, well, how much would it cost to have them come to, that in today's world, I do a lot of virtual presentations.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, and I've spoken to medical students before as well. So.
Right.
Anyway, I think it would be a good way to kind of expand things and try to grow the message a little bit more, to spread it out to more people.
And, again, I put that out there to your listeners of what was good, what didn't work, because we want to take their experiences and use those as teachable moments for, and it helps us help others. So we're just really touched by how much you engage with the whole process of helping us educate.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, this comment that just came in about medicating people, this fits very well into my guest from last week, Poppy's mom, because Poppy's mom, Katie, had a stillbirth on the due date. She went in labor and the baby had died, and she left with a prescription for, I think, Zoloft, for an antidepressant, and a prescription for a sleeping pill. And that's just what she walked out with this expectation that you're going to be a mess and you need to take these prescriptions, and that and only that will kind of get you through this. And it's not the right message that you want to send. The thing is they just don't know what to do. So they feel like, gosh, I got to do something. Probably she won't be able to sleep. Hey, here you go.
Right. Well, and if people, I've said this before. I mean, people come into the doctor and present, I can't eat, I can't sleep, I'm this or that. They want to solve that and say, here, let me give you something to help with that. But the only way to the other side is through the pain, and helping with some of that, that it's okay that they're in that, but how do we take care of them while they're in that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and I even think back to that first appointment I went to back with my doctor, and that is what she said. She said, I could give you an antidepressant, but it really wouldn't help
Mm-hmm.
because that's not what's going on here. This is grief.
Mm-hmm.
This is normal.
Right.
And that was a good thing for me to hear, actually. And I think it was good for physicians now to hear that was encouraging to me, because I think a lot of physicians would think that would be a discouraging statement,
Right.
to say, like, I can't help you, this is just the way your life is now, that
Yeah.
would be discouraging. But it really wasn't, because
No.
it was more like, this is normal, and I
Right.
know this is hard, and I know this is terrible, but I've seen this, and what you are doing is normal.
Oh.
And that makes me feel like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going crazy. I don't suddenly
Right.
need all this medication
Mhm.
to make me better, because honestly, that doesn't feel good to me anyway.
No.
Right? The whole idea of like taking a pill to feel better seems
Right.
weird.
Right. And that's 95% of my job, is
Mhm.
normalizing the reaction. So people go, oh, so I'm not crazy. I'm not. And when people reach out to me for help, they say things like, I'm not doing well, I'm a complete mess, I'm losing it. I'm just trying to think in the last week some of the messages I've gotten. I could dig out my phone because someone messaged me and I forget the line that she used. I think it was, I'm a complete wreck and I'm going backwards.
Yeah.
And when I got with her, just saying, no,
No, you're
that
not.
mess that you are, that's grief. That's what grief looks like. And she was so relieved to know that she was normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, this is part of it. So I'm not losing it. But again, it's the rest of the world. And people don't want us to feel that way. So they do want to take it away. They
I
want to
know.
find something quick, easy to make it go away.
Of course they do.
Yeah.
Of course they
Than to
do.
just sit in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really uncomfortable.
It is. It's
And that's what we
uncomfortable for
talked
people.
about, is being okay with confusion and being okay with disorder, and that just that dark despair,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
not have feeling like we have to find a way out. I don't have the answers, and I walk with bereaved people every day, but I don't feel the pressure to get them out of that, because I know what it takes, and it's that walking beside and
Yeah.
being there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I know why people act the way they do. It just doesn't help us.
No, it really
Mhm.
doesn't.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're hoping that will kind of help people a little bit.
Mhm.
You know, the other thing that I wanted to talk about today was just kind of just an update on me and
Mhm.
stuff that's been happening
Right.
with me in my life, because I don't like to talk about that so much when I'm talking to other
Right.
parents,
Because
right?
it's their story,
It's
right?
their story.
Yeah.
It's not time for my
Yeah.
story. But yet there is kind of a lot going on with my story right now. And if if you had not told me so many times to not use the phrase, I'm not doing well, all of that you just said,
Yeah.
I would have said to you today, I'm not doing well.
Right.
I'm a mess. Things
Mhm.
are really hard, because things have been really hard.
Yeah.
Things
Yeah.
have been really hard. I mean, this has just been a hard month, and I'm still feel like I'm not quite through it.
Mhm.
It started with just the anticipation of Andy's 18th birthday and all of that. And then just kind of has continued one thing after another.
Mhm. So tell me some of the events that you've gone to. I know you posted about graduation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the very first thing, and we talked about this even on Andy's birthday, was
Okay.
about how I had gotten that email that was just to all the senior parents,
Right.
and that I wrote back kind of to please take me off of the
Mhm.
email list, that I was, still on this email list, but it's, it's painful.
Right.
It was
Mhm.
painful to me. And so I sent that back, and then I got a message from the principal. And she said, we really would like to honor Andy
Mhm.
and in graduation. I don't know if you want to do that publicly or privately. And that's where we sat last time. You and I
Right. Yep.
discussed is whether we should do it kind of publicly at graduation or we should do something more private. And I was thinking about that for a long time and I hadn't gotten back to her. And what happened then is that this is now a couple of weeks ago, I get a message just during dinner from Andy's best friend's mom. And she said, we're on the way to Yoni. That's his name. Yoni's graduation. It's at the ballpark. I don't know how we'll get through it. And I mean, if all of you remember, Andy died on our way to the ballpark. We were on the exit lane. He was really feet from the property of there is where they tried to resuscitate him. So, looking at the ballpark, we went through the sign that's like exit only for the ballpark. So, all of his classmates that he had gone through kindergarten through the 8th grade and they were all graduating really at the ballpark that day. Now, Andy was not going to be graduating because he had decided to go to the aviation academy because he wanted to be a pilot. But honestly, most of those kids at the graduation did not know that.
Right. They
did not know because we didn't have the first day of school yet. And so Andy wasn't not there. So they didn't realize it. Like his best friend obviously knew, and his super close friends knew that he wasn't going to go to the high school, but everyone else kind of assumed he was, I think. So when he died, they honored him and they had counselors available and all that stuff for the first day of school after he died. But so they had that graduation there, and I had a lot of parents say that was difficult. It's the first time they've ever had graduation at the ballpark, by the way. First time ever.
Oh.
Never done it there before. So I don't know if it was just venue size or COVID or what it was to do it outside. I'm not sure, but they had it there. And so some parent, I don't even know who, apparently mentioned to the principal of the high school that they thought they should honor Andy. And so he's going through his speech towards the beginning of graduation after everyone came in, and he had this like graphic up where he's describing the class, and one of the characteristics they had was nicest. He was talking about how this class had the nicest group of kids, and then he said, and one of our nicest that we had, his life was cut short, and that is Andy Larson. So let's take a moment to remember Andy. So they did a moment of silence for Andy. And so I didn't know any of this was happening. I just get a message then, like 2 hours later, from Yoni's mom and saying that they just had a moment of silence. And I started sobbing outside. I mean, I was sobbing on the deck. The neighbors were like looking. Eric was inside. He comes running outside. I'm certain he thought someone had died in the family because I was just really, truly lamenting. I mean, it was just really sobbing. Yeah. And I had found that out. And anyway, then I get a call then probably the next day from the high school he was supposed to go to, and from that principal saying, I don't know if you've put more thought into it as to what you want to do, if you want to do it publicly or privately. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, the high school just did something. And I feel like it would be kind of weird if the high school he didn't want to go to honored him and the high school he did want to go to didn't honor him.
Right.
So I think we should do something publicly. And the other thing that happened in the meantime is that we were doing this event. You and I were doing this event. And so we wanted to do a little bit of media to promote the event so people would come. And so I had talked to our Wood TV, our local TV station here in Grand Rapids, who's like the big TV station that everybody watches, to see about going on to kind of promote the healthcare talk. And so they agreed and they were excited about it, and they came and they videoed me seeing patients at work, actually just like a fake patient, but and then they came to the house and he's setting up the cameras and we're just there chit-chatting, and all of a sudden the cameras start rolling and the reporter says to me, so something really special happened with your family last night, didn't it?
Oh, you were
It was
not
the
prepared.
day after that, and I had no clue, and I thought I was all prepped for this interview because I
you
knew what I was going to talking about.
and then they went in the back door to the emotions.
She did. So she caught me off guard. She brought up the graduation. They showed the graduation moment of silence on TV. They showed what's crazy is they showed it on TV, I think 3 days.
Times. Yes, they
3
did.
days.
They did.
They showed it Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And so all these people came up and saw it, and it ended up being hard. They did it beautifully. They did do it beautifully.
They did a beautiful job.
They did do a beautiful job. But it was really, really emotional.
Right. One of the things that I took from watching it and knowing, how you went into it thinking I'm promoting an event to the story that it morphed into was that the community really does love your family. I mean, your family was known before Andy died, but then when he died, and then you starting the podcast, and now your movement in wanting to help physicians and healthcare workers, I just got the sense that they loved you and your story, and it took on a life, and it was beautiful. It really was, but it was not something you went in that day expecting.
No, right. And I'm crying, and the cameraman is feeling bad because I don't have a tissue, and he got done recording. Like, I was feeling really bad, and I said to her after they stopped recording, "What was that? Where did that come from?" And she said, "Oh, I just saw it on Facebook yesterday. Like, you Facebook stalked me before coming to do this interview."
So those moments, and I'm sure your listeners have had them too, where no matter how far out, no matter when it happens, it brings you back. So when you mentioned the sobbing out on the deck, that brings you back to that moment of they should be here, and that long, that ripping again of what you wanted to keep, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So just warning the listeners that will happen, and it can bring you back to that day one, but you really aren't at day one anymore.
I know,
so
but it does feel that way.
It feels that way for that time, and not to think that now I've gone so far back. But the one mom explained it to me. She just said, the well of sorrow is always inside of me, but it doesn't consume me, and I don't jump in it as often. But when I do, I don't stay in it as long, and she can jump back out, but it's always right there. So, when those surprise things happen and milestones, I mean, you've had so many, 18, graduating. Yeah. So what did his school do then?
So I have to go back a little bit again. So also what's crazy is one of Andy's classmates, we just recently hired his mother to be a phone nurse for our office. And with our phones right now, after COVID, we have all the phone nurses just work from home. So I've only met her like twice. So I've hardly met her. But on his birthday, she sent me an email, and because I had cupcakes at the office for his birthday, and she said, "I have a story to tell you about him sometime." And so that a few days before that graduation, I got a message to her back, and I said, "I really need to hear that story," because it had been bothering me that I didn't know it.
Right.
And so she called me over her lunch break then that day and said, "Well, there are a few things. One, her son," well, actually, I need to go back a little bit further. So when I had that conversation with the principal, the second one, saying, yes, honor him at graduation, she said, "Well, I'm glad you decided that, because I've had a member of the soccer team come up to me and tell me that they really want to honor Andy, and they wanted to pick up his diploma for him." And she didn't want to tell me unless I had already made that decision that we
Right.
want to do it publicly. So she had told this young man, Caleb is his name. She told him, you know, that's really up to the Larsons if they want to do something. But I will kind of get back to you. And so when I found this out, and she didn't tell me who it was. She just said a boy from the soccer.
Okay.
So but I wondered if it was this nurse's son, just because she had said she had this special story and whatever. And so when she told me, she said they started playing together in the summer before it started. The soccer team would informally get together and practice. So there were no coaches, there was nobody, and it was JV, girls, boys, everybody that played soccer would just go to this park and play. And Andy was super scared the first day he went. He didn't even want to stay. He was so tiny, you know. And then this Caleb got dropped off too, and they ended up walking in there together. And at first they just passed the ball just between the two of them until the team kind of welcomed them in. And so they started kind of hanging out a little bit, and they had then their soccer practices together. And she told me a story. I had to buy Andy new shoes during soccer season because during the beginning there, because he went for a run and his feet hurt so bad he couldn't finish. And I just found out that Caleb and this other kid carried him over the finish line because his feet were hurting so bad. And then I went and bought him shoes the next day, which, by the way, fit me and I can wear.
Oh,
I
really?
wear them on occasion. But the story she really wanted to tell me ended up happening on the day that Andy died, which she didn't realize it was the day Andy died. But the whole class volunteered for Kids Food Basket, and Andy and Caleb were put in the same group for Kids Food Basket volunteering. And Kids Food Basket is just a volunteer organization that like packs meals for kids in the community. And so they were doing this, and they got out early. I finished early that day. They're supposed to get done at 12 o'clock, and I think they got back at like 11:15 or 11:20. And so Andy calls me and said they were done early. And I said, well, I'm just finishing up with patients. I'll come get you. I then sent him a message when I was leaving. I said, I'll be there between 5 and 7 minutes. And Andy called me back after 5 and said,
where are you?
No. I thought that's what he was saying. I thought he was saying, where are you? And I said, buddy, I told you 5 to 7 minutes. It's been 5. Give me 2 more minutes. I'm almost there. And he said, oh, Mom, it's not that. I was just so excited to tell you about my day. And so he just wanted to tell me because he had so much fun. Well, it turns out Caleb's mom had to go pick him up, too, that day. And Caleb was just grinning ear to ear when he picked him up. And when she picked him up, and she said, Caleb, what's going on? And he said, I just had such a great day. I got to work with Andy today, and I tell you, he is just the nicest kid. He said, Mom, he is so nice. It almost seems like he's an angel and not like a real person.
Oh, my. Oh,
so
my.
he actually said that to his mom at noon. Then they had soccer practice that afternoon, and then at 7 o'clock, 7:02, Andy died. So it was only, hours before he died. So anyway, it was pretty special.
Yeah, very much so.
And I'd never been told that story and never knew that had happened. Nothing.
And that's one of those so beautiful, but so painful.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
So painful. So painful.
Yeah.
So
Let me ask this. Was he the young man who hugged you then I saw in the video?
So, right. So
okay.
It ended up then I asked if Caleb was the one then that went to the principal and asked to do that. And his mom said yes. It was Caleb. And because, I think he really thought Andy was going to be his best friend through high school.
Yeah.
Because they both came in knowing nobody.
Right.
And
yeah, I can see it. That's what I thought. Yeah.
So anyway, when it came time then to plan what to do at the event, they were like, she said, if you would like to come up and get his diploma, or you want Peter to come up and get his diploma, you can. And I said, I think really want Caleb to get his diploma.
Yeah.
And he can bring it to us. And it felt like we wouldn't be as much of a kind of like a spectacle almost going up, and we could just be off to the side, just less pressure.
Right.
And Caleb really wanted to do it. I mean, he really wanted to do it. And so he did. So he picked it up and he handed the diploma to us.
And I will tell you, from watching it, it's on your website so people can see it, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I watched that, not knowing the story that you just heard. I did not know that till this moment. I watched that, and when he hugged you, I thought, he's really hugging you.
Yeah.
And so I wondered myself. I've seen a lot of people hug.
I'd never met him.
Isn't that amazing?
I'd never met him.
And the way he touched your back, it wasn't like, and this was so interesting. Here I'm your friend watching it going, don't be awkward, young man. Don't be It was so beautiful watching. And he stayed in for
because I just needed to hold him, because I just needed to almost pretend like it was Andy for just a second.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, very much so. And it really was beautiful. So now hearing the story and watching the video, that's beautiful. So there's, I don't want to call them blessings in disguise, but just beauty among the ashes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he told his mom afterwards, he said, I could feel Andy with me.
Oh, that is so beautiful.
I think that's why he gave me that extra hug too.
Yeah.
I think he felt like he was giving me a hug for him.
Yep. It was beautiful watching it. Now having the other part of the story. What an amazing young man. And just two things that you've said. The principal at the other school saying about a nice class, and Andy was one of the nicest, and just hearing these themes. And some of you have these same themes with your people after they die, that you hear so much about who they were and how they touch people that you didn't even know.
Yeah.
It makes you miss them even more, but there's that sense of now everyone else understands too why they were so special.
Well, and you know what's funny too, at that graduation, I felt like,
Did you want one? I was being selfish and getting myself one.
So we stood off to the side so it would be not so much of a deal, right? But everyone in the whole auditorium stood. Yeah. And I was not expecting that. I was not expecting them all to stand for him. Yeah. So that was nice.
It was. Yeah. And to honor a life and to take the time. And I probably should, I'm writing myself a note to write the principal a note to say you got it right. Because one of the things that I told you when we first got on is that this conversation is raw and honest, that we didn't, talk about ahead of time. What I wanted to ask her was, what did they get right? And I'm just reminded right now to reinforce the fact that they did do it right. They did stop and honor, because so many times we just go on with life and we don't stop and honor a life that was lived. And families sometimes even amongst themselves don't stop and honor a life. To have his whole class do that in the community was just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's funny too is now we're not even kind of done with honoring things yet, because this coming Monday, we've got another thing happening. So,
okay. What's that?
So, so Andy always went to church camp with the kids at our church, and especially during the confirmation years, they would go. So like a couple of years, I don't know if he went, I think he just went 2, but he went to camp with his church friends, and they all go to the same camp, Stony Lake Bible Camp. Stony Lake Lutheran Camp. It's out in New Era, Michigan, by Lake Michigan. So they go to this camp, and in right about the time that the pandemic started, so a couple of years ago now, they were deciding to redo their cabins because they have really junky cabins. They're just dark.
Well, that's how camps start, right?
I know they're nasty. And so they were deciding, you know what, we really need to invest in getting better facilities for our campers. So this first building they were going to build, it was going to have this cool great room in it, and then a bunk, a room of bunks off to one side and a room of bunks off to the other side.
With like a lodge in the middle.
With like a lodge thing in the middle, yeah. And it's like a $250,000 building. And so, and maybe even more than that, because they were somehow trying to raise $400,000, I think. So maybe it was even that. So to start this thing, and so they're going to have 2 of those buildings eventually, and then other little just bunk rooms. But the first one they were building, and they started this fundraising campaign, and so they asked our church to try to raise $50,000. And I immediately, when I heard this, thought to myself, this would be a way to honor Andy. And I thought, I wonder if we ask them, if we raise $100,000, if we could get some kind of naming recognition or something for Andy. And they were very gracious about that, thinking that was a great idea. And so our church, and then like over Facebook and family, friends, things like that, ended up raising $110,000.
Wow.
For the camp. And obviously with COVID and all of this stuff, the building is just finishing now. And it's being dedicated on Monday. And the great room will be forever called Andy's room.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So they had the whole big room.
Well,
so anyway, it's beautiful, and the bishop of the church is coming, and the Lutheran church. And,
Will they have a plaque too with his story a little bit? Do you know? Okay.
I mean, I wrote something.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I was going to suggest that, because there are a lot of, your listeners and families who take and raise money and do some beautiful things with it in memory of their people. And I always say, I want the story to go with it. That's what matters to you. The building's beautiful and everything's great, and people are going to go there and their spiritual lives are going to be changed. It's all wonderful. But for you, the fact that you've had a chance to have the imprint of the story and what to be remembered is beautiful to me.
They asked me, I don't know how much is going to be on the plaque and what they just wanted for the dedication ceremony, but they asked me to write like 300-400 words, and so I did that, and I'll post it. I'll post it on Facebook for people to
I was at a camp. It's Warner Camp. It's near South Haven, and they have a high ropes course that was in memory of a young man, and his family has a plaque there, and it was just really touching. And then another one of their courses in memory of one was a car accident and one was cancer, and just their different stories, but 2 young boys, and that's just touching to me that you have that. But now you have another emotional thing, right? So it's like you just keep bumping your throbbing, like, oh, it hurts. Yeah,
I know. And what's kind of funny too is that I've shared this. I've not shared it with a lot of people, that either the camp thing or the graduation thing. I didn't, because every time I would share it with someone, they would just smile and say, "Oh, that's so great."
You're like,
"That's so great.
I'm bleeding."
And I was like, yeah, it's great. But it's so, I use this because I recently interviewed someone, and it's not aired yet, but you'll all recognize it now when you hear it. But her daughter had said something was excruciatingly beautiful. And I was like, that's what it was. Yes. That's what graduation was. It was excruciatingly beautiful.
I love that. Yes.
I think Monday will be excruciatingly beautiful. I like that term better, because I'm so, it's just not helpful to me when I tell somebody about something that's going to be really heartbreaking and really difficult and challenging for me. And then all I get back was, "That's so great. That's wonderful. They're doing that for him."
Yeah.
And all smiles, like it's
so
all
much
beautiful.
Yeah.
And like, but there's so much not beautiful.
Yeah. Right.
So excruciatingly beautiful.
I love that. I had a friend talk to me about a Bible study she's doing, and she said, the heart obedience part. And I thought, heart obedience, because so many times people say, just obey. Like obedience is so easy. It's like, no, it's hard. Yeah. So I love that adjective before the beautiful. It is excruciating.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
there's so much, and you're just in a season of a lot of that right now. So I wanted to ask you, after the graduation ceremony, when you came home, what did you do? How did you feel? I'm like, do you find yourself more exhausted? Like,
I
what were
was
some of the
exhausted.
physical things?
So first of all, I couldn't eat much at all the day of it. I mean, I hardly ate. I couldn't
Yeah.
eat dinner. Like Peter comes down, what's for dinner? Like I don't,
Yeah, got
whatever you
nothing.
want, because I got nothing for you. Because
Mhm.
I felt like I was just gonna vomit. I was just
Mhm.
like just so
Yeah.
nauseated, and I got done, and I was just tired. But Valeriano, my foster son, came too, and he got me something to eat. So we ate a little something then. I mean, it was nice to get it done. I mean, in a way, right?
Mhm.
It felt like such a task to have to do. I
So
mean, it
the
was so beautiful.
anticipation
Yeah,
was hard
Yeah.
and caused the anxiety. So when it was done, at least you didn't have the anticipation of it.
Yes. Yes.
You still
So
have
I
the
was
emotions
still.
and the exhaustion.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And that's what we want, that's the part when people go, oh, that's so great, that they don't know
Yeah.
that
Right.
comes with it.
That were right. That it was
Yeah.
so exhausting.
Mhm.
And I mean, it worked out just beautifully. I felt like the whole graduation even happening was like orchestrated from above, because they graduated on a Thursday. I, of course, normally work Thursday nights, and
Mhm.
because Andy was not graduating, I did not take it off.
Mhm.
But I was assigned to round at the hospital that week, which in one way was bad because I was having to work every day and I was so
Mhm.
stressed out. So it was a hard week to work. But on the other hand, was good because on the weeks that I round, during the day, like that Thursday, I only had
Mhm.
to see patients for like 3 hours.
Right.
So, or 2.5 even. So I saw patients for 2.5 hours, and then I went home at 3:30, and this graduation is at 7. Well, normally I would have been working
Right.
past 7. So I
Right.
never would have even been able to do. So it was
Mhm.
like worked out well. And then it was Eric's golf night, and then but he had an early tea time, but it turns out then it rained, and so it was canceled
Oh.
anyway because he was going to have to leave early to get there. And so it just felt like it was meant to be, that we were
Mhm.
meant to go,
Be there.
and we were
Yeah.
meant to be
Yeah.
there for the thing, even though we wouldn't have taken it
And there
off.
were other names on the list too. So other students had died?
No, it was just
Oh.
him.
Where did I see like 4 names at a school? Wasn't Andy's?
No,
Was
it
it
must have been somebody
I'm gonna
else.
look it up.
It was not.
Okay, somebody that I saw, and I meet so many people, so forgive me for not, but there were 4 names.
Yeah, no, that you know who that is. Oh, I know who that is, and now I'm feeling terrible because now I'm blanking.
Well, I feel bad too. Um,
Oh, this is
but
driving me crazy.
it's
I'll remember
okay,
afterwards.
all right. But my thought with that is that, one of the things that your listeners sought out in the podcast was they're probably some of the only people in their community who have had this happen. But I was thinking of that school or whoever that stopped and had 4.
Yeah, they did.
And
have 4.
it's like almost having your own little grief support group right in that, community of grieving people. But many times we're the only one, and it could go years without another student dying or having that. So,
Well, and I know I talked to that mom,
mhm.
Tanya? Elias.
Yeah, maybe it was Tanya.
Yeah,
Yes,
it
it
was.
was with Brooklyn.
With Brooklyn, yes.
Yes.
That's who
Okay.
it was. Now,
Yep.
interestingly, so Brooklyn, I think, died when she was 10, so quite a bit
Right.
younger,
Yeah.
but they still honored her at graduation, and they honored all 4 of them. But she said they were the only parents to go.
Really?
The others didn't go.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, and so
Because
she's had one of those really hard
I read
seasons.
that.
Yeah.
It was the day after they had done the moment of
Mhm.
silence at Andy's, and so
Mhm.
shortly before I did mine. So I wrote to her just saying that I was going to
Right.
be doing it. And so she wrote back to me and said she was the only one. So
Wow.
mhm.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but you're right in that it can be nice to do that a little bit in community.
Well,
if that's
I was
possible.
just shocked. I mean, to see a senior class that would have had 4 deaths, that's not that common.
No.
So,
but thinking of that brings me to this past week again with that horrific shooting.
Yes.
In Texas.
Yeah.
And I've talked to many of my friends who've lost kids, and that just puts us all right back there again too.
Doesn't
You
it?
know, it's
Yeah.
just to just see those parents and read those stories and just know a little bit of what they're feeling. Obviously, I mean, it's
Yeah.
different because it was a horrific murder situation and not, an accident or
Right.
an illness, but still to just know that they're gone forever and how that must,
Mm-hmm.
it's the worst day of their lives.
It is. And you read those posts where people say, to some people it's a headline and it's a horrible headline and you go, wow. And it's far away from where we live. So you can almost remove yourself going, wow, some really bad things happen over there or down in, another state in our country. But for bereaved people, it is right here.
It's right here.
It is. And the journey that those parents are going on. And you and I've talked about this because I remember talking about one of our first podcasts was together was on those early days, right?
Yeah.
That they're in that numbness, but when that numbness hits, they're beginning a journey that they have no idea, but it. So you hurt in a level for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. And a level that other people just can't feel. And that, right. It's just different. It's just different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It was very painful. And I think for a lot of your listeners, just, probably brought a lot of tears and sleepless nights. And
certainly had many people texting me about it. So.
Yeah, very much so.
It is one of those things you just want to go and give somebody a hug, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think we probably ought to wrap things up here, but I do appreciate the people that have kind of gone on and written in some comments.
Someone said community is often nicer than family.
Yeah.
And that is true. When I said about taking the time to pause and remember, sometimes families don't even do that at holidays or dinners, just to take that time. So when a whole community remembers, it's touching, but
It is. So anyway, if any of you want to go out to New Era, Michigan to the dedication next week, Monday, you certainly can.
That's my 35th wedding anniversary. So
I was just inviting people in general.
Yeah, no.
Congratulations on your wedding anniversary.
Yeah. So just encouraging others in realizing that those painful moments do come up and you're in a season of them. And I think, when I asked you when you came home how you felt, and just as we started this by talking about the doctors taking care of themselves, I want to encourage you to do the same thing, just because you are a caregiver, to take some time for you. So after this season of graduation and the dedication, I hope you have a little bit of R&R coming up.
Well, thank you for that reminder.
Yeah. You need it. We all do.
Okay. Thank you.